One. Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hello, how do you do? I'm Sadia's mother, and here is my co-host, Raven. Say hello,
Aw,
Raven, to everybody. Yes, she wants to feel included.
it's always very important to feel included. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just recently watched the latest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. It was pretty good. Not gonna lie. But it was
I
kind of
remember,
like,
what was it, Effie, who made you, your older sister, for one of your birthdays, made you a Teenage Mutant Ninja cake to look
yeah,
like one of the teenage. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, I remember that. It was funny. Um, the main topic I wanted to talk to you about, and I sent you a message a couple of days ago, so you can have time to think about it. Was what was your ideal thought of how you would have kids when you were younger? And did it change over time? And what was your like wish fulfillment that you wanted to, what kind of like children you'd imagine yourself have, or the bonding moments you would have with your children, and whether that came true or it just, didn't work the way you thought it would?
Does life ever work the way we think it's going to work? Which,
Of course not.
in a way, it's good that it doesn't. You know what?
Okay.
How boring! How boring of a life would that be? If every single thing turned out exactly the way you wanted it, exactly the way you imagined it. How boring! No surprises. Ah,
So please tell me. So what kind of children did you think you would have?
oh, beautiful, obedient.
Beautiful, obedient. What kind of experiences would you have with them, or did you imagine yourself like having like, bonding moments?
That's a good question. Never getting angry at them, never hitting them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I think maybe if you accept that you're gonna do that, maybe it'll change and it'll be
I
different.
remember one time I was discussing with, like I said, our generation was that bridge where we were coming away from the idea of disciplining kids by hitting them to
Mm,
trying to work with other methods that were more positive. And that it was a bridge. It was a transition. It was a transitional generation, you might want to say. And so it was difficult in that we still had that mentality of, smacking your kids, but we didn't like the idea and we were trying to get away from it. But as far as like having, like I mentioned this before in our podcast, that when friends of mine and myself went to therapists to try to work with our children better, all we got was a list of don't, but no real skills to do. And
hmm.
that was a very serious problem. Um, so I was remember discussing with one of my friends. I said, I said, I don't believe in hitting my kids. I don't think it's good. I think there are better methods, but what? And she said to me, if you don't believe in hitting your kids, that means you're going to hit them just the right amount.
It's funny you say that because they're obviously nowadays it's like smacking a kid is like the worst thing in the world. It's not even like back in the day where like you hit the kid, okay, what, so what? Now it's just like it's really like you can't hit your kids. But there's a lot more tools nowadays. Just skimming over and watching on Instagram, there's plenty of people voicing their opinion on how to raise kids. Some of them successful and logical, and you
Mhm.
agree with, and others don't make any sense at all. So you ignore, but you take it with a grain of salt. But because of the Tower of Babel that is the internet, the whole concept of now everyone has a voice makes it a lot easier for you to, I would say, cherry pick an opinion to
Yes.
really figure out what you can and should do.
Okay. But I've been watching, I understand these episodes are very, very old, but I watch them anyway. The Super Nanny with JoJo, the
Oh
British nanny.
yes, yes, I
Yeah.
remember that.
She she gives these parents really good tools. The
Hmm.
techniques that use the, their actual physical tools that the parents are using to create a more, positive atmosphere in the house.
I always wonder if like I'd watch them now and see how well these episodes have aged. Just with the criteria and the knowledge that we know now and the mentality that we have nowadays. You know, like it's funny,
and
but
I also wonder how these kids turned out eventually, because
yeah,
these episodes, how old are these episodes? 10 years, 20? What are they?
you're looking at about
Oh,
20 years. 20.
yes. So these kids will. I'm curious to see how all these kids. Would be nice to see like interviews with these
Yeah.
kids, and now that they're in their 20s, what they thought of the techniques and how well did it work, and like how many of them are using the same techniques to raise their children.
What was this called? Super Nanny?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was an article that came out in February about all the kids that were grown up after Super Nanny. So so unfortunately, some of them had like a 10-year prison sentence. Others what were like single parents. Like it
No.
didn't end up very well.
Oh no. So that reinforces the old idea. Gonna get a smack.
It's just it's like
Oh no.
so it depends. It depends.
Uh,
Um there's this one person, she's a 26 years old, she's into sports. She has a TikTok and she said, over the few years after Joe visited us, we grew up and the dynamic changed in our family and that made us behave better. Um, Another scene which showed the child launching at Nanny's Joe to slap her prompted a question from a fan if the moment was scripted. And they replied it wasn't scripted, it was them hitting. So some of them came out well, some of them didn't. It's very much it's very interesting. I'll post it on the family WhatsApp.
well, I
But
remember actually growing up, some of the Jewish kids, yeah, we got smacked, whatever, but the white Anglo kids, the non-Jewish kids, oh my gosh, they got it a lot worse than we did. They had one in particular method that was used by a lot of the, non-Jewish parents. They would force the kid to go into the backyard and pick a switch, pick a piece
yes,
of like from a
yes,
tree. Yeah, what they wanted to be hit with. And one of my Goysha friends said, many years ago, this is a Goysha woman who grew up like that with the
yeah,
switch. And she said, at first, she would pick a small, thin stick. And then she realized that was a lot worse than picking a bigger, thicker stick.
yeah.
But,
Um,
like like being sent to bed without any supper. Jewish parents never did that. Jewish parents, it's not a Jewish thing to punish with food. Jewish parents,
yeah.
when I was growing up, my mother always said, never, Jewish parents never send their kids to bed without any supper. No, that was not a Jewish technique.
But I don't know because I mean I'm thinking of like the way I grew up and the way other people, like other friends of mine, grew up,
Hmm.
and I think in the 90s it was a slow burn of sitting down and talking to your kids. And I remember as a kid being disciplined and felt that if my parents just talked to me, I could have a conversation. And I felt very frustrated how parents and adults treated teenagers and kids as if they were imbeciles and as if they were incompetent. And even though they might have been immature, I think they I think children are pretty competent when you give them the right opportunities and the good tools. But it's just again, I'm
You
just
don't think I did that?
well, it's like this. It's like when you're trying to go ahead and, you know, talk about the homework that we did and explaining what to do, repeating yourself, even though the kid seems frustrated and they're burnt out and they're at their limit, and you still push them past their limit. Then they have a hissy fit. Then there's crying. Then there's a fight. Then there's a kid like going to sleep exhausted. Like, okay, something isn't working. You might have to reevaluate. So like the homework has to get done, but let's try not to have a total chaos in the household. But I don't this is me talking with like zero experience as a parent, so I don't know what's going to
You'll
happen.
get your turn.
I'll get my turn all right. I'll get my turn all right. I don't know if what's
Well, I remember one
like
technique I used with your brother, where he sometimes would be very stubborn about not wanting
yeah,
to do his homework. Very stubborn for no reason. He was a very smart kid,
we talked about
and
this I think
so,
once.
yeah, to show him my bones.
I think so. I
Well, we've got some new listeners who want to hear about this. But if
Sure.
anybody's having trouble with your kid with your homework, if you have any DVDs, or you have any MRI film or anything like that, or X-rays, tell your kid, if he or she does their homework, you will show them your bones, and they go,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And you show them after they do their homework, you show them the X-ray or the DVD. They're gonna love that.
Yeah, kids are. I think
Little
it's funny when you
sadistic,
look at
little
like,
sadistic but fun.
yeah. It well, it's with children find a lot of adult mundane things like fascinating. I remember like going only like one time, but like going to Tati's office back in the day as a kid and found it so cool and fascinating.
Yeah,
Um, but
I remember. I think I
you
was
know,
with you. I think I was with you guys. We went down
yeah,
there. I think it was a Pesach Moed or something, or one day where there was it was like your father had to pick up something at the office or something. We all went down there to see
probably,
it. That was
probably.
fascinating. That was interesting. I got to meet some of the people. There was one time that your father brought a couple of his coworkers over for dinner, and I was on Spilkas because I thought, oh no, I don't want these coworkers to come and say, oh, Zalman's wife is so horrible. She doesn't know how to cook and she's so ugly. So I straightened up the house. I cleaned the house. I made a really, really nice dinner. And then I put on a shade on and I got dressed up nicely. And they came and they had a great time. And I confessed to one of them. I said, I was really nervous. I told them I was really nervous. And I told her, I said, I was really nervous because I didn't want you guys going back to the office and telling people how horrible I felt. They just cracked up laughing.
Cute. Yeah. I mean, out of curiosity, what did you find fascinating growing up as a kid that, like, looking back now is very mundane and ordinary?
Mundane and ordinary. Hmm.
Yeah, like I'll give you an example.
The dead chickens.
The dead chickens. Oh God.
I think we went through that about the dead chickens.
I think we did. We talked about this a while
Yeah,
ago. We talked about
yeah.
dead
Because my father
chickens.
was. For those who are new listeners, my father was in the fruit, vegetables, and poultry business. And so in those days, you actually would go to the shechting house, where they had live chickens, and you would pick up the chickens you wanted, and the shechtler would shecht them, and they would put it to a flicking machine, and then they would give it back to you. Would give these chickens would be given back to the dealers, totally intact, no feathers though, and the head and everything.
Mm,
Feet, head, totally intact. And my mother would be the one who would take orders from the customers who wanted them like cut in eighths, cut in quarters, whole, whatever. And she would clean them and kosher. This was before and the stores started actually cleaning and koshering the chickens for you. You
mm,
either did it yourself or you had some man like my father who, this was his business, and my mother would help him in the business by, cleaning and cutting the chickens, custom, however the customer wanted them. So Aunt Judy, for a joke, sometimes when these chickens were there, before my mother got a chance to get, to cut them and clean them, she and I would, and I think Aunt Dan would take the dead chickens and hold up the whole chicken with whole head, and we would run with them across the living room floor. We'd call it the dead chicken races.
how old were you?
I think I had to be 11 or 12 or maybe 13.
Funny. That's funny.
They were
No, I was talking
teenagers.
when I was a kid. I found clothespins fascinating because if you look at it one way, they
Oh,
could be like little people.
I heard this one of the morning news people, for a joke,
Hmm.
got on the air like early in the morning, and he started to say that he bought the other day he bought an ecology friendly um an ecology friendly clothes dryer. And the other person,
Oh
an
yeah.
ecology friendly, he said, yeah, he says, ecology friendly. It says, and he says it works by wind energy. And they said, really? And he goes, yeah. And it came with clothespins.
Waka, 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 waka.
Something, I told this to one of the young teachers, like in her 20s, who works at, the school where I work. She didn't get it at first.
Oh,
She didn't know what even clothespins were. I mean,
I
this
think I,
generation put everything in the tray. They didn't even know. She had no idea a clothesline with clothespins. She'd never seen it in her life.
well, it's funny because there's still like like on my street, there's like in the backyards of a lot of houses, there's clothespin lines that are still there from like the 1940s that when it was put in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's actually it's funny because as a kid, I used to play around with the clothespin lines and pretend like I'm a tightrope walker because I walk on the fence and then I hold on to the clothespin line and then like try to like keep everything together. Did you do anything like that? Like anything like with your imagination and what you pretend to like play with?
When I was very little, I remember I must have been like 3 or 4 years old. My parents got me a hobby horse. Hobby
Okay.
horse is like, um it it was a wooden horse on springs, and you sat on it, went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was on springs. So it would bounce back and forth and back and forth. So I wanted to get the feel that I was on a real horse, like high up on a real horse, instead of this little hobby horse. So I remember picking up this hobby horse, putting it on my mother's dining room table, climbing up,
God.
and then sitting on the hobby horse and riding it back and forth on my mother's dining room table.
Did you leave any marks? Was your mother upset?
I don't know. I don't know. She wasn't.
That's funny.
I don't think I left any marks on the furniture. She had a tablecloth on there, like a thick
Oh, okay,
tablecloth.
fine.
I don't think I left any marks. Um, I remember as a young kid playing nurse, but my mother gave me one of my father's like old white shirts for
Hmm.
like a nursing uniform. And she took a napkin and she folded the napkin and pinned it on my hair so it looked like a nursing cap.
Very cute.
hmm
Very cute.
When I
So you'd
played
be a
nurse.
little nurse.
And then there was this one outfit I had. It was black pants and a black top. And I had my parents gave me some sort of like, I don't know, maybe for Halloween, I wanted to be a pilgrim. So I dressed up in and they bought me a rifle. They bought me a rifle and they bought me a pilgrim hat.
Hmm.
So, and I had the black top and the black pants. And I remember I even like to put it on and walk around with it, even though it wasn't Halloween. I remember one of my sister's friends looking at me and saying to my sister, "Hey, she was just like a pilgrim with the
Cute.
black top." And.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because it's like I guess also, I know I've been talking about this stuff lately, and we've had this conversation before about like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But did your parents ever do anything for Sukkot?
No, not really. No, we didn't. Um, in Baltimore in those days, the only people that had sukkahs were the frum people. No, in fact the non-religious people didn't really do anything with sukkahs. I remember my mother though. I remember us observing it like a yontif. Like we didn't go to school for the first two
Hmm.
days of sukkahs. We didn't go to school the last 2 days of sukkahs. But the ins and outs and benching lulav and esrog and having a sukkah, no, we never did that. Now the shul where we attended, Bet Tefillah, had this big, beautiful sukkah, and so we went there for. I remember us going there for I don't know if it was Holomoid. I don't know if I think it might have been Yontif. Yeah, I remember going there for Yontif. We went to shul. We did go to shul. I remember going to the sukkah for the kiddush afterwards. That I do remember. And I remember Simchas Torah. I didn't know Simchas Torah was a real yontif. I thought it was like a chag, like Purim. So my mother would give us. It was a custom where the parents would give their children apples, and when
Hmm.
you got to shul, you had your choice. They would pass out flags. You had for the children's congregation making hakafas with a little Torah. Um, you had your choice when you got to shul of either an American flag or an Israeli flag, and then you took the apple that your parents gave you and you stuck it on top of the flag. I don't know why, but you stuck the apple on top of the flag, and you would parade around the shul. Usually, they would pick usually a little boy was usually picked to carry not a real Sefer Torah, but they had one of these little Torahs, real teeny little Torahs, small
Yeah.
Torahs. And I remember the rabbi giving the Torah to this little boy, and we were standing behind him, and we all paraded around, the shul with this little boy carrying this little Torah with our flags and apples. And I remember one time my mother giving me the apple before I left the house I'm sitting in the kitchen and I unconsciously ate it. I look and I see the apple core in my hand. I'm gonna start to cry. So my mother says, "Here's another apple." She gives me another apple. So then we get in the car and we go to show, and I get to show, and I've got an apple core in my hand. I didn't even realize I'd eaten it.
Oh God, that's funny. I think what's funny is I remember as a kid looking at pictures and like cartoons of Simchas Torah with people having apples on top of their flags. I never did it, but I do remember that. I mean, now I'm gonna be, God willing, I for the past couple of years I've been going to my sister's all the way up in New York, and basically like their Chabad house there like throws a huge Simchas Torah, you know, get together, and it's fantastic. The kids like love it, and it's just it reminds me of like old school Base Lubavitch back in the day, because
Mhm.
there's more, I guess there's just more liveliness. I haven't been to Base Lubavitch Superstar for a while, but I went to Kaparos. Finally, I haven't gone to Kaparos in years, and it's interesting because it's all the way out in Colombia, and everybody comes in, and because the Chabad houses, the Lubavitch community in Baltimore has grown so much that that's really kind of what's happened, where everyone just come to Columbia. But I have a question actually about Kaparos. Did you know about that when you were younger, or did you find out about that when you got older?
I found out about that after I became from. I
What were
never
your
knew about
thoughts?
it. Never knew about it. Didn't think too much about it. It was like, okay, if this is what's expected of me, this is what's expected of me. Actually, the first time I did Kapars, I was in Crown Heights, and I got together. I had a car, and hardly anybody, you know, hardly any of my friends had cars in
Mhm.
New York. So I remember I had a carload of friends, and we drove down in Williamsburg to a Shechting house in Williamsburg. Um, Also, the very first one, that was the second one. The very first one was I was living with and I was renting uh, the basement in Rabbi Bogomilsky's house. Rabbi Bogomilsky, who wrote the Dibar Tabam. I rented their basement apartment the first year I was there. Very wonderful people, wonderful
Mhm.
people. They really took me in hand. They really helped me to make the transition to from kite. And so we woke up. We woke up. I woke up very early in the morning and went with them to the shechting house. And this particular chef that I saw, the way he shechted the chickens was excellent. I've heard stories from other people who have gone to shechting houses who said, or seen people shechting who really didn't know what they were doing. But my exposure to actual shechting was very positive. Um, I couldn't get over whoever the chef it was. Boy, he was very medoctic, extremely medoctic. The way he handled the chickens, the way he handled the check, he was constantly checking that checking knife, constantly.
Mhm.
And he would take the chickens, and the way he would handle the chickens, they were so calm, were so quiet, and he very gingerly spread their feathers on their neck, and it was boom. He did like split second. Then he put them in this bucket that had this cone on top, so that the chicken was upside down and would bleed quickly into
Yeah.
this bucket, and it was like nothing. I mean, not nothing, but you know what I mean. It was like so
Yeah, I know
peaceful,
it
so
was
quick.
peaceful.
He was excellent.
Yeah, that's why for a while for a while I didn't like the Kaparis, because the people who were handling it at the time were aggressive and ignorant and didn't know what they were doing, and it kind of bothered
Mhm,
me. But this year, I just got to a mood of like, you know what? I want to go ahead and do a chicken. I'm tired of doing money. It's kind of boring. It's kind
mhm.
of lame. I want to do a chicken. I want to have that experience. So they charge like $50 for Kaparos.
Wow.
But
Uh-huh.
but
For
but
chicken.
it's not per chicken, it's in
Oh.
total, whether you have
Oh.
a lot of kids or not. So it's like for the singles or the newlyweds or the small families, it's not
Mhm,
that much of a bargain. But when you have the large families of 10,
mhm,
20 kids, it's a lot cheaper just to give a $50 flat fee.
Oh
So
yeah.
in a way, it's kind of communal where it's like I covered for like a bunch of other people, so to speak. Um,
Hmm.
but it was nice. But I noticed people were wearing gloves. And I'm like, I never wore gloves, and I just like picked up the chicken and did the whole Kaparos and
Yeah.
like did
Hmm.
whatever. But I'm like, to like I don't need to go ahead and do gloves. Um,
Hmm. I guess they have
but
their reasons. Who knows? Maybe I don't know. They have their
salmonella,
reasons.
health wise,
So
there's
you wash.
plenty of
Remember, we always wash our hands immediately afterwards. Yeah.
yeah. You wash your hands. Like I don't know.
Hmm.
I felt like it was kind of this one woman was like, yeah, there you go. You grab like a man. I'm like, okay. Um, so I guess
I
I
find
because
I find
I
I find I find with the doing it with the chicken, for some reason it's much more meaningful. This is a live creature
yeah.
that is basically taking all your aver. It's like, we done at the base of Mikdash,
Hmm.
and how nice would be to actually to see, to have real korbanos and real and have that kavana. But it's the closest thing to it right now,
Yeah.
and it's just it makes it a lot more meaningful. Also, the way people handle it. Well, me being raised, around chickens, um, I knew better. I knew how to raise them so that it's not. I had to pick them up so that it's not painful, and also they won't run away. But
Yeah.
you've seen how I've done it, where one hand goes, by their feet. I hold their feet with one hand. The other hand, I'm holding their wings. I'm holding them. I don't hold them by the wings. The other hand holds them from the top, holding the wings down, and then I
Yeah.
pick them up that way.
That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
It
was surprised at how many women. There was one time I saw this one woman there who her husband was trying to show Kaporis with her. And she was screaming for a woman. Was I don't know. This
screaming.
is like people. She started screaming every time her husband brought the chicken over. She just screamed, and then finally her husband said, "You know what? I give up." And he just walked away with the chicken and did it himself and did it with the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what you get when you have tons of anxiety that hasn't been addressed by a therapist. But
When I think it is, I think that um, we Americans, maybe we Jews, have become too urbanized. You know what I mean?
maybe,
When we have, I've seen a lot of people that have never in their life had experience with any type of farm animal whatsoever, and they freak out. I mean, they see this animal, it's this creature, and it's alive, and they just
well, I think that's
they don't
why.
know how to deal with it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because they talk about the idea of Judaism, of why it's so important to practice Judaism in a community, in a city, because it's easier to do it like on a farm away from everybody on some level, where you're away from other external influences, and it's easier to hold your own and hold on to your ideology when it's not being attacked every day. But when you have Yidden living in an urban setting, it really makes an impact. And what's funny was I was listening to a podcast like a couple of weeks ago, and these two comedians were joking around because one guy was Jewish, the other guy was, I think, Greek or Italian, and the Greek guy was saying, like, it's amazing that, like, you have to be liberal when you live in a city because you're dealing with so many diverse people, but it's amazing how strongly the Hasidim in Williamsburg hold on to their identity when right next to them is like the left of Lenin, person with like all sorts of piercings and dyed hair, and right next to him is a chassid, the black, white shirt, black pants, Sputnik, whatever you want to call it, like whatever they're wearing for the day, Hasidim, and it's just and like a non-Jewish person noticed that and pointed that out, and I always find that very fascinating. Um,
When I was in Crown Heights in the 1970s, the United States government sent some sociologists to Crown Heights to research why it was that in an area, in a neighborhood, which at that time was considered very high crime, that the Lubavitcher Hasidim were involved in none of it. And how was it that they were able to raise families and not be affected by any of this, like I said, high crime that was going on around them? the conclusion of the sociologists, I understand by a friend of mine who lived in Crown Heights at the time, she heard about the study and she said their conclusion was the Torah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah. But
Torah
but you know what?
was adherence to the Torah is what kept what kept these Hasidim free of the atmosphere that they were living in and
It's
unaffected by it.
the thing is it's Torah in itself when the people that are guarding that Torah know the truth it holds. Because everybody knows don't kill, don't steal, don't rob, don't commit adultery, don't have set courts, things like that. But there's a level of conviction that you want to say that you didn't have, that they make it such a strong reality of no, this is this is real. This isn't just some maybe thought that we can question ever so often. This is a you do not do this. You keep this together, because there's plenty of other communities that have spiritual leaders, and have you know religious buildings and religious affiliations, and there's still problems. um but what I was trying to say beforehand was I was talking about like the Yom Kippur of when I was growing up, where we would see the chickens get shechted, because this time we didn't see the chickens get shechted.
Hmm.
um but I think it's very important to see how an animal gets killed, and then understand the importance of life being taken away and then using it for sustenance. There's definitely like a strong point to be made to make that feel like a precious moment. And that's why brachos are so important. Because a lot of people, they just take things for granted, but you take someone, you show them a chicken, and then you show it gets slaughtered, and you pluck the chickens and things like that, like our neighbors back in the day.
Oh yeah,
Um, I think we talked about this in the one other
yeah,
episode,
right,
but
yeah. Uh-huh.
that was something where like it really is a strong like sense of reality that you have to face.
Mhm. Well, there was did we ever talk about carp in the tub?
Yes, we did multiple
Yeah,
times.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So my-
Yeah, but it's true though. You should have this understanding of like this is a living creature that we are killing for food,
Well, I was
you know?
remember one time I was talking to somebody about how far we Jews have come from being an agrarian people and that we're too urbanized. And I remember a friend of mine saying that biblically we Jews were a tremendous agrarian people.
Mhm.
And you look at so many of our mitzvahs. We have so many mitzvahs
Yeah.
that are connected to agrarianism, to farming and harvesting and raising crops and animals and everything. And he said he also agreed. He said it's really sad that in a way that we've come away from that.
Yeah.
Unless you live in Moshav in Israel or kibbutz in Israel.
Well, again, that's the whole point, is that like in an agricultural society, you definitely have a better feeling of what's going on. But due to the Industrial Revolution and everything else, that things kind of shifted and changed. Um,
By the way, I met
but
a very interesting woman today. There's a teacher in our school who was telling me and my coworkers about her mother. That her mother lives in Arizona, and her mother's one of these people who she's like a back to the land type person
yeah,
from Jewish woman, and her mother has her own little farm in Arizona. And she was telling us, and we're talking about Kaparos, and she says her mother raises chickens, has some goats. She has like a whole little farm there in Arizona, which I think is amazing. I mean, to for someone to take it on themselves to want to live that kind of lifestyle, that's wonderful, actually.
I have a random question, total side note. Are you familiar with like any AI that you use throughout your day? No?
What's AI? I know artificial
Oh,
intelligence. I know, but I
yes.
keep on hearing this AI. But what exactly is it?
So,
What exactly is it? Is it? I mean, the computer in general. It's supposed to be artificial intelligence. So when they talk about AI, are they talking about computermation, like in the movie
I'll give
Forrest
you an
Gump or something
example.
like that?
I'll give you an example. You know, people have to construct all these emails at work, right?
Mhm.
And they have to think about how to make their emails and whatnot. What you could do is you go on ChatGPT, which is a program, and you type in, you prompt it to write you an email of basically what you're trying to say, very, very basically. And then it gives you like a nice elaborate cut piece of something you need. And so there's a lot of parts of artificial intelligence that is cutting out a lot of middlemen, a lot of, you know, things in the arts, definitely. Um, you know, it's a tool that people haven't harnessed fully yet, but they're getting there where it's definitely making something happen where you need less and less of a person's effort. And I was
Well, I
curious
mean,
to,
yeah, but I see that now. I mean, look how many times you get, you call an office and you get like this robot or something, asking you for your information, um, or
yeah,
you get a call from somebody and it's basically, it's like I said, it's a robot. I think so. Is that AI? Is that what they're talking
yeah,
about now?
that could be that's part of
Mhm.
AI. I was curious to see if you've ever looked into it or been wondering what it was.
Well, I haven't used it myself. I haven't had an occasion to use it. All I know is what I've heard about it and what I've seen, in different, like, what's it, what's the guy, scammer payback. They were talking
Oh,
about, there was a small segment that talked about AI, and the young man at the end of his spot about AI says, if you don't know what AI is, I'm using it now. In other words, you thought this guy was putting on a presentation, and you find out no, that he put together this thing with a video he took a video, and he didn't record his voice, he had something else recording it, and it was actually AI. It wasn't really him
yeah, yeah.
that
I've
was
seen
doing
that.
this.
I've seen that where there's this person that like did this whole had this whole Instagram and TikTok, and you think it's some random teenage guy or adult guy, and really it's just this young girl who like works in IT. I think I don't know. I'm probably ruining it, but something like that, where it's like it's amazing what people can do nowadays and how far it's going to get us. Because I think of like because I really think about emails and how long it takes to really
Mhm.
construct an email. And then this just pumps out a nice, good, tight email in like 3 seconds. That would take you like probably maybe like 5, 10 minutes. But you add those emails up in this world, it basically makes things go a lot faster, a lot quicker. You know, it's technology is going to go faster and faster and faster, where it's like, and I've mentioned this before, where, you know, what you think is technologically advanced today,
Mhm.
literally in a year will be obsolete.
Right. Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I remember when I was a little girl in the 1950s and early 60s, that's when a lot of this technology started to take off. And so the
mm.
question came up with, will machines take over the world? Will machines take over the world? And when I was a little girl, I remember one time asking my mother that question, will machines take over the world? And my mother said no, because you will always need human beings to run the machines. I mean,
Yeah,
you're going to need you're going to need people behind all this technology that is basically going to run that's going to run this technology. But I remember, if you look up in the annals of history, there was a very, very dangerous situation. I forgot when it was. I think in the 80s or something, where a computer. Well, there was a movie many years ago called Failsafe,
mhm.
where the United States and Russia
You
get
have
into a
like less than a
nuclear
minute
war.
left, by the way.
Oh, so anyway, um, so what happens, something went with the computer where they thought that there was an actual attack that the Russians had launched, and instead of launching an attack back, they decided, no, let's wait and see, maybe this is a mistake. And true, it turned out to be a total mistake. So some artist did a political cartoon where it shows all this destruction, and it shows in the middle of all the destruction a computer, and on the computer is a sign that